Have you ever wondered what would happen if you put strangers into a vanilla Minecraft world and let them create civilization from scratch, but without any rules? Well, a few months ago, I did just that. I created a vanilla Minecraft world and found a suitable location for what was to become one of my biggest and most ambitious projects yet. The WALLED experiment. It all started with the idea of simulating a real-life reality within Minecraft, and although that sounds insane, there was a chance to make it possible. I was ready to take on the challenge. But I never could have been ready for what was to come. The first thing I had to do was some research and planning. What would keep the event exciting? How would I make the players interact with each other? How would I prevent this from turning into just a regular SMP? And then I came across this video. An experiment titled The Closed Map Experiment was carried out years ago by a player called Woodworks Experiment and contained almost exactly what I wanted to do. And the way they did that was by trapping the players inside bedrock walls. Although just a regular survival world, the players were limited to just the land and resources within a small area rather than the infinite nature of the sandbox game that Minecraft is. Not only did that remove the non-renewable aspect of many items in the game, as well as making some resources almost completely unobtainable, it also forced the players closer together physically and to interact socially. Which is exactly what I needed. With a sudden rush of inspiration, I was motivated to get this project started as soon as possible. I created a world in Minecraft version 1.17, and that's when everything quickly started to fit into shape. A spawning location on the edge of a jungle with a small village in the corner, as well as an opening to an ocean, some small hills with snow and spruce trees, and the center being a general plains biome. Not only did it have plenty of room for the construction of grand structures, but it also had the explorative nature of the ocean and the secrecy of the jungle. The world itself didn't give access to every item in the game, however, and some things were already labelled as extinct. But the biggest question was, how would the players react to each other? Would players be in favour of a peaceful society, or would they create strong factions and start wars with one another? It was honestly impossible to guess what would happen, and soon enough the experiment was ready to be begun. And on the 2nd July at 8 PM BST, the first session officially started off the event. It was time for the experiment to begin. As the players spawned in, they were met with what appeared to look like just a regular survival world, and naturally they started running around, exploring and punching trees. But slowly, I noticed that some players started to form a temporary pact of peace, sharing items and avoiding violence. It was much earlier than I was expecting this to happen, and I was in utter shock on how determined people were to form bonds straight away. As people continued to get stronger and get better items, the peace treaty developed into the very first faction on the server, the Alliance, which at that moment housed itself across two bases, the underground and the sky base. A big aspect of the map was the village in the corner of the jungle. At first it housed a large number of villagers, to the point where there was even an iron golem. However, the players at this point were still very much destructive, and the village was quickly stripped of its resources, which would become very catastrophic later on. Another thing to note would be the rare resources on the map, with these sugarcanes being the only sugarcane on the entire server. Would the players plant them wisely, or would they use them up? In the very first 20 minutes, a player of the name Sakone established himself as the server's anarchist, raiding innocent players and stealing their stuff. People from across the world started to realize this and escape into the underground, where a lot of their journey would continue from then on. Fast forward an hour, and the alliance by now was built up of a large number of people. Mainly Dio, Kessel, Mina, Aiden, but later even joined by Strawberry. It looked as though people started to become fed up with Sakone's anarchist actions, and even started to plot a rebellion. This was when I realized that a story had started forming before my eyes, and we were about to witness the First Great War. The Alliance was ready for battle, with the whole server against just one player. Although Sakone had much better gear, he was not able to overcome such a large power, and so he broke into a run. The Alliance chased Sakone across the entire map, through the lands and the oceans. Until he was cornered off atop a jungle tree, where the grand battle was about to take place. And after blood was shed and lives were lost, the Alliance stood victorious, driving Sakone away from the server just as the event closed for the end of the first day. Avoiding the action on the surface, a player of the name Spectral was developing a base under the ground, which would later become the Underground faction. Although still alone and playing solo, the hideout started expanding and growing. There even started to be early signs of trading going on as Logi joined Spectral's side. But out of nowhere, last session's anarchist, Sakone, returned again and started wiping out weaker players who had just joined and didn't yet flee to the underground. By this point, Sakone was by far the most powerful player in the game. He had full enchanted diamond armor, an enchanted diamond sword, and a powerful bow. The Alliance was no longer able to resist his forces, and anarchism was taking over the server. Outside of war and conflict, people started gathering back together, and for the first time realizing that it was time to start creating renewable resources. They started gathering animals to start a farm, fishing to get food, as well as planting wheat, and the one and only last source of 6 sugarcane was gathered and started as a farm. With the borders stopping them from gathering infinite resources, it was time to reproduce them on their own. Carrots and potatoes, unfortunately, had been labelled as extinct. Soon after its creation, the Underground Nation made the decision to move to the surface to stay closer to the other players and factions. And so, the NEVERA faction was created. Formerly the Underground Nation, NEVERA was a new faction led by Spectral. With very organised members and efficient workflow. Their first large-scale project was to start building the fortress. Which would later become known as the Church of NEVERA, where a lot of events took place. But just as things were starting to look good, one player managed to turn the world back into chaos. After rejecting to join NEVERA, Adrian was murdered by a player named Manifold, which alerted the members of both factions. The Alliance was shocked as to why the ally was being killed, and NEVERA was not going to accept the members showing signs of violence. Although the conflict was sorted out by leaders of both factions, it was a shocking call sign and disturbance in the world's peace. It wasn't long until Manifold found another player's base. The new target was a solo player named Astral, who was hidden away from the action above the world's surface since the very start. Manifold murdered Astral, stole his powerful gear, broke his chests, and escaped. Word spread quickly to the surrounding factions, and Spectral deemed Manifold as officially banished from NEVERA for his wrongdoings. Secretly, the leader of NEVERA, Spectral, was plotting a militant alliance with Manifold, keeping it a secret after he was banished from the faction. She provided him with resources for explosives as he went around and caused destruction without others even finding out. And sadly, due to the inactivity of its members, the Alliance was also raided by Manifold. First, he set alight the House of Strawbarrow, as well as looting and destroying all the chests. The farm was next, in which 2 axolotls went missing, presumably dead. The Alliance was left with nothing again. No loot, no gear, no hope. But 2 powerful adventurers, Aiden and Logi, made it their #1 priority to track down Manifold and get Astral's gear back. They were becoming frustrated by his ongoing bad actions and decided to put an end to it. After an hour of hopeless searching, they were finally able to locate the anarchists in the area of the Alliance's old base. And together they beat him, and they were victorious. Manifold was taken down, and Astral's gear was returned to him. After the Anarchist was defeated once again, peace reigned through the world for the third time, just as it had previously. Soldiers were returning from war and finally resting from continuous battles and searching, and a general happy atmosphere covered the lands. But little did they know, this was only one of the many battles to come. Meanwhile, as this was all happening, two new players were building a nation on the opposite side of the world. Rose and Waffle had set up a new faction, AQUATIC Equipment, which would later become a very prominent force on the server. Within a few minutes after the server opening on the 6th day, Sakone had returned after his disappearance and started wiping out players one by one. First came a few solo players, and then he went for the AQUATIC Equipment faction despite their alliance. He wiped out the entire faction, later finding the underground base and destroying all of their supplies. This left the AQUATIC Equipment faction defeated and forced them to start over. Sakone, now established as the permanent villain of the server, was once again the most powerful player in the world. He raided other bases, destroyed the chests, and burned everyone's items. And despite the efforts of the other players, he continued to pillage anything and anyone who came along his tracks. By now, I had noticed a crucial mistake that the players were making. Although they wanted peace and prosperity, it was hard to achieve that in a world where stronger superiors chose violence. But rather than fighting back, they chose to continue playing peacefully, and therefore Sakone became stronger and stronger. But ultimately, just as before, Sakone's actions angered the players, and many started planning an attack. Over and over they chased him down and attempted to kill him, but were always unsuccessful. As tension began to grow again, and people developed a rebellion, the world was plunged into the Second Great War. Sakone had fled to the now abandoned Church of NEVERA, where the big battle of the church would take place. Setting up a quick base atop its roof, he was quickly ambushed by the Aquatic Equipment army. A battle started and players were sending attacks one after another, attempting to get to Sakone and bring him down. Soldiers died, items were lost, but Sakone stood his ground, and after a long and tiring battle, Sakone had managed to escape once again, and the Aquatic Equipment were left with nothing. Meanwhile, other players from the AE faction were focusing on a bigger issue. They had been able to get a hold of a zombie villager and made it their #1 priority to cure it. All the villagers were wiped out in the first session, and villager traders would become the most looked up business on the server. Aquatic Equipment became the very first people to bring back the race of villagers. The next day, things were starting to look better again. With Sakone having won the war, peace was present across the world once more. The biggest change at this point was Aquatic Equipment's decision to relocate the base, and it would be moved to the roof of the Nether Dimension, away from the dangers of anarchism and violence. Would the layer of bedrock be able to keep them safe from the chaos outside? After contemplating it for many days, Sakone finally set up his faction, Night Raid, which would become the very first anarchist faction ever created on the server. Although he still remained peaceful for the rest of the session, Sakone spread his faction and gained 2 new recruits, Logi from NEVERA and Kessel, who had joined after previously being in the Alliance and later in the Aquatic Equipment faction. Due to Kessel's betrayal, it wasn't long until Aquatic Equipment's secret Netherroof base was exposed to the public, which left them vulnerable to attacks from the outside. It was crucial that their experiments and hideout was kept private and away from everyone else, otherwise very valuable items would be lost. With their breeding of villagers and journey towards a mending book, they decided it was time to relocate once again, and that meant a very long journey. With their relocation to the roof of the Nether, Aquatic Equipment had decided that it was time to rename their faction. Now that they inhabit the Nether, the old name no longer corresponded to their mission. They had risen from the ashes over and over and had begun their new adventure as Phoenix Reborn. Following the path of Phoenix, Night Raid also decided to move to the Nether and escape beyond the bedrock roof. After the old base was exposed to everyone, it was time to move on and protect their resources. Now, they are hidden from everyone else, able to plot their devious acts in secret. With many hours of playtime and not much action, the anarchist faction Night Raid had become bored of standing by and decided to return to their old ways. Their first target was Astral, who had been peaceful ever since the last Great War. The anarchists started gearing up with their most malicious weapons they could think of, weapons of mass destruction never before used on the server for militant actions. But that was about to change. They travelled back to the overworld and located Astral's base, entering it unforgivingly and raiding everything they could find. Astral was wiped out, his chests were looted, and all of his items burned. Nothing but ruins were left behind. And soon after, another inhabitant of the overworld, Bunny, was also located by Sakona Logi, which led to her demise. As she was away, the anarchists rushed her underground base, burning everything in the path just as previously. This was the start of what was about to become the Third Great War, plunging the server into yet another unrelentless state of chaos and destruction. No one was safe anymore, and especially not in the overworld. Players had to restart the progress once again from square one. As the anarchists reigned with strength and power, only one faction remained safe and hidden. As this was happening, a Phoenix Reborn player, John, had been building large structures across the sky of the overworld, crossing over in the center. But over time, what was once just an innocent project turned into a devastating structure which set the world aflame. John's two sky bridges emitted columns of lava which flowed down onto the world, encompassing it in two huge walls of burning magma. The world had officially been separated into even smaller sections, each quarter of the world banished by the walls of lava. And following Kessel's footpath from a few sessions ago, John decided to join the anarchist faction Night Raid, which meant the worst for Phoenix. Night Raid now had a direct link to their hidden base, including precise coordinates which could lead Phoenix to their doom. With Phoenix's base now being subject to any attack, Night Raid was quick to send scouts to investigate the surroundings. John went first, but wasn't met with a friendly greeting after his abandoning of the Phoenix faction and betraying them. However, no blood was yet to be shed. Despite this, the world was still at war. The Third Great War had in fact not been ended, and no one seemed to have been gathering forces to bring down the aggressors. And so they reigned more powerfully than ever, a second scouting group soon being sent to Phoenix, this time Kessel and Logi. Clearly armed with far more superior armor and weapons to Phoenix, they felt comfortable being able to walk around into the base without any threat. They too weren't met with open arms. But again, no blood was shed, and Phoenix stood back and watched as all of their secrets were being revealed to the most dangerous people on the server. Who knew what would happen next? The Third Great War was soaring across the server. Tensions were high, players were afraid of every move, aware that one mistake could lead to their demise. Once Logi logged on and noticed that the Phoenix players had left a trap to kill him, he decided it was time to stop being passive and get revenge for the militant actions. One by one, the villagers were slaughtered along with the only Phoenix member alive, Strawberry. It was apparent that Logi's strength completely outmatched that of Barrow's, but she kept fighting. War broke out and attacks were sent over and over to stop the anarchist reign. But nothing could stop Logi in his tracks. Everything that Phoenix had worked for was slowly falling apart, until they were left with nothing. Strawberry continued to send merciless attacks towards him, until it was over. With the power of the nether dimension mechanics on her side, she had crafted a few beds and used them as her final weapon against the anarchist intruder. Ultimately killing them both. The loot was collected, and the Night Raid faction was quick to find out what happened, and they weren't happy. Sakone decided to launch a final attack against Phoenix himself and finish off the work as revenge for his friend's death. He traveled to Phoenix's base and executed Strawberry efficiently. The remaining surviving villagers were killed off. The loot and everything the faction had collected was exploded and burned, and the spawn point was blocked off so the members wouldn't be able to teleport back. And so, was this the end to Phoenix? Had the anarchists won the Third Great War? Was this the end of the experiment? In fact, it was all over. The world had crumbled under the destruction of the anarchists. Now, not what it once was. The world was burning in magma. All players were looted and killed off, until only Night Raid was standing tall. The anarchists were victorious, and the experiment was plunged into an endless darkness. The experiment was honestly the best event I had ever hosted, and I'm so happy to have been able to develop it into what it had become. The players were amazing at building up this detailed and extensive story for the world, and it was so great to see where they took it from an outside point of view. It never became what I had expected, but something much larger. We had built up a community for the WALLED, which would later become a whole server for events of all types, which you can join with the link down below if you are interested. We all started as strangers. Random players who hopped on a server to play Minecraft together. And now, after so many hours, I can truly say that I made great friends along the way. Honestly, I was not aware of how big this would become and how much it would affect my life. Every day of the WALLED, I would be so excited, counting down hours and minutes, waiting until the session begun. And I could see that many players were too. Before the video ends, I just want to thank everyone, both old players and new, for coming along and joining the ride, because it was amazing and I wouldn't have traded it for anything else. You made this event exactly what it was, and I'm so thankful for it. Thank you for creating a beautiful community and fulfilling my dreams. You're all amazing, and I can't wait to see what the WALLED has in store for us in the future.